In today's video, I'm going to be talking about 5 players who I think are most likely going to be traded during this offseason. Starting off, you guys seen him in the thumbnail, we have Max Pacioretty. He's been the center of trade talks in Montreal for the past couple of seasons. And I was really under the assumption that he was going to be traded at the previous deadline, and I'm really surprised that the Canadiens did decide to hold on to him. And I would imagine Max Pacioretty is kind of fed up playing for a team that is kind of dysfunctional at this point in time, and they aren't really anywhere near being a contender just yet. And he is 29 years old, and it really is up in the air on how many good seasons and if he has any more 30-goal seasons left in him. And I think if Montreal is going to trade him, they should do it now, because his trade value is not going to get any higher than it is at this point in time, and he could certainly benefit a contending team. Max Pacioretty has a cap hit of $4.5 million through this next season, and there are articles coming out that Montreal is maybe in talks with Pacioretty on a potential contract extension. But Montreal is a rebuilding team, and why would you want to re-sign a 29-year-old who's in his prime and probably wants to play for a Stanley Cup contending team? This year was kind of seen as a down year for Max Pacioretty, as he only had 17 goals and 20 assists for 37 points. He did have trouble staying healthy, and that obviously is a huge damper on your point totals. I still think Pacioretty has it in him to have a couple more 25 to 30 goal seasons, and I think a team that could benefit heavily from that is the Edmonton Oilers, who are kind of lacking forward depth after that Jordan Eberle trade didn't really work out, and then obviously with the Taylor Hall trade that ultimately sent Adam Larson to the Oilers in exchange for Hall, which is now looking like it could go down as one of the worst trades in history. And Connor McDavid does need some help carrying the offensive load, and I think him playing with a guy like Max Pacioretty could only benefit the two of them, and I think it could do wonders for the Edmonton Oilers team. And I also think that they could get a pretty decent return for Max Pacioretty, and you don't want to risk losing him for nothing. So I think it would be in the best interest of the Canadiens to just embrace the rebuild and trade their star forward Max Pacioretty. Next up, we have Ryan O'Reilly of the Buffalo Sabres, and his name has recently just came up in trade rumors, and that it is reported that the Vancouver Canucks are heavily interested in acquiring him. Ryan O'Reilly is one of my favorite players in the entire NHL. He's a fantastic two-way forward. He played in 651 career games so far and has 422 points. He's a fantastic guy to put on your power play and park him in front of the net, as he's 6'1", 216. Not an easy guy to move from out front of your goalie, and he's a guy that really has never had a chance to compete for a Stanley Cup yet, and in my opinion, he's the perfect guy to have on a Stanley Cup contending team. Ryan O'Reilly is a guy who just loves to play hockey. He's a competitor. You always see him playing for Team Canada at the World Championships whenever he gets the opportunity. And like I said, he's a competitor, and I think he wants to compete for a Stanley Cup. And the teams that are interested in him are kind of interesting, because they're really not going to be competing for a Stanley Cup anytime soon. O'Reilly had the best season of his career points-wise this year with the Buffalo Sabres, scoring 24 goals and 37 assists for 61 total points. And this guy's in his prime. His trade value is probably at an all-time high, and he's another guy who I think Buffalo should maybe consider getting rid of. And right now, from what I've seen, the teams that are interested in him most are the Vancouver Canucks and the Montreal Canadiens, two rebuilding teams, so why really would they want to bring in a number one potential center? Obviously, I know Montreal is in desperate need of a number one center, but a guy who's 27 years old, you don't really need that if you're on a rebuilding team, and I think you'd probably have to give up a decent amount of draft picks and young players to get this guy, and for these teams, I don't think that would be very smart. So it is interesting. I do think Buffalo maybe should exercise trading Ryan O'Reilly, but for these two teams being interested in him, I think is very interesting. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Ryan O'Reilly this offseason. Next up, we have Erik Karlsson. I'm sure everybody's seen this coming. He's been in trade talks. It was rumored at the trade deadline that he was so close to being traded to the Vegas Golden Knights. He's a fantastic guy. He's one of the elite defensemen in the NHL, and if you want to get him, you're going to have to give the Ottawa Senators a boatload in return. He's played in 627 games and has 126 goals and 392 assists for 518 points. He's one of the best offensive defensemen in the game today. If a trade with Erik Karlsson involved was to go down, it would probably be one of the biggest trades that we have ever seen in recent memory. You guys thought the Ryan McDonagh trade at the deadline was huge. Just wait in to see what happens if the Senators do decide to trade Erik Karlsson. And I don't think this team really is that close to being a contending team like they were last season when they were one goal away from the Stanley Cup final. And maybe trading your star defenseman and getting a lot of stuff and a lot of assets in return is maybe in your best interest, because you could risk losing him as he does become an unrestricted free agent next summer. And if you were to lose him for nothing, that would be a huge blow to your franchise for many, many years. Potential landing spots that I have seen in articles for this upcoming offseason are obviously the Vegas Golden Knights, who came this close to getting him at the trade deadline, and the San Jose Sharks were reportedly heavily interested in him this season as well. But now after signing Evander Kane to that huge contract, this seems less likely to happen. So I think the most realistic spot is the Vegas Golden Knights, and I think that would be a fantastic fit for Erik Karlsson, and that might be what the Golden Knights need to put them over the edge and make them a Stanley Cup winning team, as obviously we're all seeing what is happening with them right now in the Stanley Cup Finals. Out of all the players on this list, I think Erik Karlsson might be the least likely to be traded, as he is a 5-star player, and in today's NHL, blockbuster trades are very unlikely to happen, and we really don't see them too often. But with this guy as the owner of your team, you really never know what's going to happen. So if I'm an Ottawa Senators fan, I would buckle up, because this could be a really rough offseason for you. Next up is Max Domi of the Arizona Coyotes. He was a guy, when drafted at the time by Phoenix, he was really expected to be a franchise player for this team, and he is only 23 and has a lot of potential left, but he really hasn't lived up to the hype just yet. Right now, I think a trade involving Max Domi could be the best thing right now for his career, as Arizona really does already have their franchise forward in Clayton Keller, and they're most likely going to get another exceptional young talent in this upcoming draft. And for Max Domi, I think he would benefit tremendously from a trade out of Arizona, as I don't think it's a good fit for him there anymore. The past 2 seasons for Domi have been seasons to forget. He only scored 9 goals last year. He did have 36 assists, but 45 points from a guy with much higher expectations. It really isn't sitting well with the front office of the Coyotes, and I think that is why we are seeing his name brought up in trade talks this summer. Right now, the team that Max Domi's name has been linked to the most has been the Pittsburgh Penguins, and I think this is a fantastic fit for Max Domi. I think he's a guy you could slide in on that line with Sidney Crosby, and he turns into an instant star, just like most players do when they play with Sidney Crosby, and that gives you the ability to drop down a guy that is already playing with Crosby to just increase the depth on your team. So I think for the Pittsburgh Penguins and for Max Domi, this could be fantastic, and I really do hope this trade does happen, because I'm a fan of Max Domi and I want to see him do well, and I think if he went to Pittsburgh, it would be fantastic. Next up is Noah Hanafin. He's another guy whose name has been brought up recently in trade talks. He had 10 goals and 22 assists for 32 points this past season, and he was an all-star, and his point totals has just been increasing and increasing every season that he plays in the NHL, and I think he really does have the potential to be a fantastic defenseman. When drafted, Hanafin at the time was seen as the guy that would take over the future of the Carolina Hurricanes blue line, but since then they have just been adding and adding on the young talent to this blue line, and he really is expendable because you have so much young talent to offer already besides Noah Hanafin. So you might be asking, why would they trade their franchise defenseman? Well, here's why. The Hurricanes have more than enough young talent to be able to trade one of their guys away to maybe bolster their lineup up front and get some more firepower. And the teams that have been interested in Hanafin most are especially Vancouver, and I've heard Florida's name sprinkled in there a little bit, and I think he would be a fantastic fit for either of these teams. He's young enough to be on a rebuilding team and be part of a future, and he's good enough to be on a Florida team who's trying to be in the playoffs, and they're really on the cusp of that, and I think Noah Hanafin adding to the depth of their defense core could be fantastic for the team. So I think either one of these teams getting Noah Hanafin, it would be a great fit. So that is going to wrap up this video. I really hope you guys did enjoy. Make sure to let me know down in the comment section if you think any of these players are going to get traded and where, and if you guys think I missed anyone that you guys think will be traded this offseason. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel for daily NHL content, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.